Hello, bookworms. Welcome back to the Bonafide Bookworm. I'm your host, Rachel, and if you're here to read along with me and improve your English. So, something I forgot to mention last time was I was looking at my channel, and I'm sure there's a way, I just haven't fooled with it, to change the image that it puts on your YouTube channel for the newest video that it uploads. But I haven't really messed with that. I've just let YouTube just pick whatever picture from the video and put it up there. And I'm not going to change that because I think it's hilarious. I will pop up a screenshot of all the pictures, hopefully on one of these sides where my hand is, because I think it's hilarious. Like, I don't know how many times you all have paused a movie or a TV show or something like and it's landed on like the person's face just looking funny. Well, it seems like YouTube is picking every weird, funny face that I make and making that the main image of that particular video. And quite honestly, I just think it's hilarious. Like when I go through and look at it and see me in some weird, pose where I'm talking, I think it's very funny. If you haven't looked at it, I suggest you go back and look and just see the pictures that YouTube picks because it's pretty funny. Like I said, I'm not going to change it because it cracks me up, and I hope it cracks you all up too. I don't have, let's see, I'm trying to think, did I watch anything? Oh, I did watch something, but I'm going to save that for the next episode. But I will come back to that. And I'm still going back and forth on what book I'm going to actually read for my personal reading. So far, I'm still in the James Patterson mode, so still reading that. And I don't think I have any other updates right now. I'm glad that you all enjoyed seeing Finn and Ivy. I think actually I might create their own little channel because I was really happily surprised and shocked to see how many people viewed them. It just makes me happy that other people enjoy my dogs and that other people are as dog crazy as I am. So more to come on that. I'll let you know. So for now, we're going to pick back up with Untamed Seas with Deborah scaling Kiley and Meg Noonan. And we stopped on page 45, chapter 3. They're like moving on down the coast apparently, and it doesn't look like Meg is gonna leave, even though she's not supposed to be on the boat supposedly, but we'll see. Okay, yeah, chapter 3. Over breakfast, John made it clear that the crew search had fallen on my shoulders. From a phone on the dock, I called my friend Sarah Cavanaugh, who had sailed with me on the Charles Hedsec 3 in the transatlantic race the previous spring. She wasn't around, but her mother told me that Sarah's brother Brad was in Annapolis and might be interested in a job. 2 men were walking down the dock toward me. The sandy-haired man was tall, maybe 6'3", and extremely muscular. The blonde one was short and wiry. I realized that the tall man was Brad Cavanaugh, whom I'd met 6 months earlier. "You won't believe this," I said, "but I just got off the phone with your mother." And then I started to tell him about trashmen. "Christ, Brad, got a bird in every port, have you?" The other man said. "Oh Lord, should I try and do a British accent? It's going to be really bad." The other man said he had a British accent and the strangest pale blue eyes I had ever seen. Brad introduced me to Mark Adams. I asked Brad if he wanted to see trashmen. As the 3 of us walked down the dock, Mark ran into someone he knew and stopped to talk. When Brad and I got to the boat, John popped his head out of the hatch. "Gee, Debbie, that was fast," he laughed. "Hey, you said get crew, I got crew." I introduced him to Brad. We all went below, and after talking for a while, John asked Brad if he might want to join the crew. "Sounds like a good possibility," Brad said. "I got this buddy Mark. Think you could use him too?" "Is he good?" John said. "He's done the Fastnet, Admiral's Cup, SORC. I've done some races with him. He's kind of crazy, but he's good on a boat. Mark came aboard and John offered him a job. On this pig, it will probably take us a bloody year to get to Florida. Sounded, I think, Australian. Sorry. Mark said. Then he looked at Meg and me. These wenches going, are they? I hate taking women on boats. They're absolutely useless on boats. Everyone laughed but me. Mark told John he might be able to join us even though he was busy putting together a racing crew for Ocean Greyhound, a big boat that had done the whitbread a few years before. Whitbread, sorry. I was surprised. I had seen that boat in dry dock in England not long before, and it seemed unlikely that it would be raced again. Debbie here did the last Whitbread, John said. That right, Mark said. That's right. I bet I know what your job was, he said. He grabbed his crotch and shook it, then cackled. Brad reached over and gave Mark a friendly shove. Don't mind him, Debbie. He just likes being a prick. I did mind him, though. I minded him very much. I got up and went on deck to find something to busy myself with. In a little while, John, Mark, and Brad came up. They shook hands. It seemed to be a done deal, pending Newberger's approval, of course. I don't really like Mark, I said to John when I had a chance later that day. You don't even know him. I know his type. Brad says he's a good sailor. We need crew. He'll be on the boat for a week at most. No big deal. John telephoned Newberger and got his okay to hire Brad and Mark, and that, of course, called for a celebration. But John's cash was running low, and he asked if any of us could loan some money to the boat until Newberger wired him more. Mark had a paycheck for $150, but when the five of us walked to the marina office to cash it, the clerk looked at the check and frowned. Sorry, pal, can't do it, he said. Come on, I'm good for it, I swear, Mark said. Ask anybody. This accent's terrible. Mark started reeling off names of people who could vouch for him, and the clerk finally went into the back room to call one of them. In a minute, he returned and handed Mark the check. He said you were, quote, one of the biggest assholes he had ever met, and it would be a cold day in hell before he'd cash a check of yours, unquote. Mark's face flushed. He clenched his fists, and then he started to laugh. You fucking moron, he said, and stormed out the door. I know the bartender at Marmaduke's, Mark told us. He'll cash the bloody check. Marmaduke's was jammed with sailors in town for the Annapolis boat show. Mark went off to talk to some people about Ocean Greyhound. I couldn't believe he was really going to try to get people to quit their jobs to work on this fantasy project of his. This was not the way people were recruited for world-class races. I watched Mark stop and talk to someone I happened to know. When Mark moved on, my buddy waved me over. Are you with that guy? He asked. The skipper of the boat I'm taking south just hired him, I said. Is he for real? He says he's hiring a crew for Ocean Greyhound to the Sydney-Hobart race. It sounds like a great trip. Do you know any way to check it out? I'd really be interested. I've met the owner, Les Williams, I said. Maybe I could give him a call. I looked back at John, Brad, and Meg. Mark was standing with them again, gesturing wildly, and they were laughing so hard they were doubled over. Maybe it's just me, I thought. Maybe he's really a prince of a guy. I turned in early, but I had trouble falling asleep. I couldn't stop thinking about Mark and Ocean Greyhound. In the morning, before anyone else was up, I went to the payphone and called a friend who told me how to reach Les Williams in England. When the call went through, I explained who I was and said I had just been asked by Mark Adams to join the crew of Ocean Greyhound. He told me the boat was still in dry dock and that he had never heard of Mark Adams, so I had my answer. I felt kind of sick, almost wishing I hadn't made the call. I knew for certain that Mark was not just annoying, he was a liar. I sat down on the dock and stared into the metallic blue water and tried to decide what to do. I couldn't believe this whole thing, this wild, belligerent Englishman, this half-assed skipper and his ball-busting, non-sailing girlfriend. It was a joke. I sat and thought for a few more minutes. What if I just get my gear and walk away now? I have friends in Annapolis. I'll find another way south. No, that's dumb. Why should I leave my boat? I decided I had to tell John what I'd found out about Mark. When he heard about it, he would have to kick Mark off Trashman, wouldn't he? You know the Ocean Greyhound crew Mark says he's hiring? I said to John later that morning. It's all bullshit. That owner never heard of him. How would you know that? He asked. I made a call to England. You what? God, Debbie, I really don't want to hear about it. I don't care what this guy's doing or not doing, okay? We need crew. He's crew. That's it. Why don't you just mind your own business for once? This is my business. I don't want to sell with that guy. I don't want to go if he's going. That's ridiculous. I'm serious. I'll leave the boat. If you leave this boat now, John said slowly, I will make damn sure that you never get a job on another boat again. I mean it. You can't just get off the boat just like that. I can, John. I'm not your little slave. I don't want to go with Mark. Debbie, for the last time, you are not getting off this boat. We are going to provision the boat tomorrow, and then we are going to leave the next day. All of us. You, me, Meg, Brad, and Mark. I understand how you feel about Mark. Oh, sorry, that's Meg. I understand how you feel about Mark, Meg said. She had been listening to our conversation. But if you just ignore him, yeah, just ignore the guy, John said. And it would help if you stuck up for Debbie once in a while, Meg said to John. He sighed. Look, once we get underway, everything will be great. You'll see, he said and went up on deck. But I couldn't let it go. I had had enough. As soon as I could get away, I walked back to the payphone and called Morris Newberger. I told him that I had changed my mind, that I missed racing and was going to fly south and try to get a job on a racing boat. Newberger asked if there was a problem with the rest of the crew. I hesitated and then said, no problem really. When he began to remind me of my commitment, I could feel my resolve weakening. Before his lecture was over, I knew that I was not going to get out of this trip. I was going south with Trashman. I walked back to the boat, feeling like a fool, for making the call and for being such a pushover. By 5 o'clock, John, Meg, Brad, and I had everything stowed, cleaned, and checked over. We got cleaned up and headed to a restaurant to meet Mark and have one last celebration before our departure. We ate dinner, then moved to the bar just as Mark came lurching in. This is Tilly, Mark said, losing his balance and almost knocking over the small, pretty, brown-haired girl he was trying to introduce us to. John reached out to keep him from tipping over. After ordering more drinks, Mark stumbled toward me. Hey, Mark, I said. I just talked to a friend of mine in England today, Les Williams, the guy who owns Ocean Greyhound. Everyone stopped talking, and Mark's face turned red. He said he never heard of you, I went on. He said his boat was in pieces. You stupid cunt, he snarled, bringing his face close to mine. What the fuck are you doing checking up on me? No big deal, I said. He seemed surprised, that's all. Come on, guys, John said. We're having a good time here, don't wreck it. I'm not wrecking anything, I said. I'm having a great time. You think you're so fucking special, Miss Whitbread, Mark said. Brad reached over and grabbed Mark under the armpit. Come on, he said. Sit down here. Forget about it. Debbie, just drop it, okay? Fine, I said. As we were leaving after last call, Mark grabbed a full bottle of Dewar's from behind the bar and bolted for the door. Back on Trashman, we partied until almost dawn. Mark, who was drinking Dewar's straight from the bottle, brought the party to an abrupt end by reaching up under Tilly's skirt and pulling down her underwear. Mortified, Tilly went back to her boat, and the rest of us headed for our cabins. I was drunk and tired and disgusted with Mark. By noon, we were ready to cast off. The crew was in rough shape, but the weather was great. The wind was behind us from the north-northwest at 10 to 15 knots under clear skies, and the temperature was in the high 60s. We had one... So sorry, the dogs were barking. Okay, back to where we were. By noon, we were ready to cast off. The crew was in rough shape, but the weather was great. The wind was behind us from the north-northwest at 10 to 15 knots under clear skies, and the temperature was in the high 60s. We had run a weather fax that morning and listened to the radio reports, and it looked as if we would have good weather for the next 3 or 4 days. We took off down the Chesapeake using the mizzen, the main, and the multi-purpose sail. Trashman loved it. She was flying, surfing down waves at 9 knots and making us forget what a big, heavy boat she was. The wind began to build late in the afternoon, just before sunset. John decided to take down the multi-purpose. He said he didn't want to risk damaging Newberger's prized possession in the dark. About 6 o'clock, we started our watch rotation. Mark and John took the first stint, and Brad and I went below to sleep. 3 hours later, Meg woke us for dinner. John had put the boat on automatic pilot so we could all sit down together. Meg, John, and Brad were in good spirits, but Mark sat stone-faced, staring at me with those glacier blue eyes. "If you think I've forgotten about you checking up on me, little Miss Whitbread, you're wrong," he said. "Paybacks are a bitch. You'll see." I looked at John. He was the skipper. It was his job to keep the crew in line. "Keep it to yourself, man," John said. After a moment of tense silence, Meg started chattering about some bar in Fort Lauderdale she wanted to see, and everyone seemed to relax again. I finished my dinner quickly and went up on deck. It was a beautiful starry night, and Trashman was dancing across the waves. I tried to forget about Mark and concentrate on the wonderful sound of the boat slicing cleanly through the water. I closed my eyes and let the wind hit my face. The air was chilly, but I was dressed for it, and I knew that with every minute we were that much closer to Florida. When Brad came on deck, we took the autopilot off. With the wind just off the stern, Trashman was in full sail, wing and wing, with the main and the mizzen and the jib pulled out. It was the first time I'd sailed her like this, and she felt fantastic. Brad and I took turns at the helm and talked. Enjoying ourselves so much, we decided to let the others sleep a little longer. I liked Brad. He was easygoing and funny, and obviously in love with sailing. There was a gentleness about him that belied his size. He reminded me of a giant teddy bear. He told me how he had grown up in a suburb north of Boston, and his father had started him sailing when he was just a little kid. "When my mother was pregnant with me, she and my father sailed through a hurricane," Brad said. "And when I was in high school, my dad had a 38-footer that I was required to sail on every weekend." Required? Yeah, every weekend and every day when my father was on vacation. I told him I had learned to sail at summer camp in Texas, but I hadn't been around boats again until I dropped out of college in Austin and took off for the Caribbean. "Wasn't your mother pissed off that you quit school?" Brad asked. "I didn't tell her," I said. "I just left. I called 4 months later. I don't think she even knew I was gone." Around 4 in the morning, we stopped talking and realized how tired we were. After we got John and Mark to come up and take their watch, I collapsed in my bunk and almost instantly fell asleep. We're going to stop there on page 55. We will pick back up on Thursday as usual, and we will go from there. I hope that y'all have a great day, week, month, year, wherever you're at. I hope it's great, and see you back here next time. Bye.